All right. Welcome back to another episode of Give It to the People Live. I want to welcome you because, every time that we do an episode, we want to bring you somebody that is a Black owned, woman owned, BIPOC business or an organization that helps them to be able to grow. And so today I have somebody that I was able to meet because of the fact that I am a part of Black Wall Street. And so the Black Wall Street is an initiative that is here to really helped to kind of reimagine what the Black Wall Street looks like in current day, as opposed to what it looked like, in the 1920s. And so this young lady has a lot of energy. And so reminds me of myself because, I'm always a ball of energy. So I always love that because that means that we're going to have a great interview. And so I'm going to bring on MaKayla Booker today. MaKayla, how are you?
Hello, I'm amazing. How are you?
I told you all the energy right there. So I'm amazing too. So I just want to just jump straight in to the interview because I know people, if they've been able to kind of look at some of the stuff that we posted online, then they were able to kind of look at some of the things that you've done in the past. But if you could just give us like a small little 1-minute synopsis of who's MaKayla and what makes MaKayla tick.
Yes, MaKayla is an individual who is from Durham, North Carolina, Bull City breed, of course. Yes, throw it up. We love it. Very ambitious, but someone who is driven by passion, community-led, and loved.
Oh, okay. See, and I love that. All right. So when you look at that, I would just want to ask you a whole bunch of questions. And I know we only have 30 minutes, but what do you think about growing up in the Bull City in North Carolina probably shaped like who you are as an individual and as a business owner?
Yes, being from North Carolina and Durham alone, I tell people all the time, Durham is a special place. It's not one place that I've ever been that is like Durham, but it made me a strong believer. I lost a lot of friends growing up as early as 13, so it made me very strong-minded, but it also showed me what it looks like to be resilient and also how to use my passion and make it work for me. One thing I like to tell people, broken crayons still color, okay? So even though things happen in life, you can still use that and make the world colorful with what you have.
Yeah. And, color is one of my things. When I tell people, I tell people usually what are 3 words that kind of identify with your brand. And so mine is always confidence, color, and quality. And what would you say identifies with your brand? Because when we're talking about what you're doing, you're trying to help the youth to be financially literate. So if you had 3 words to kind of encapsulate what you do, what would be those 3 words?
Mine would be passion, of course,
Mhm.
prosperity, and purpose. That's one
Okay.
thing I think is purpose led, right? So just making sure that everything has a gift behind it, not looking at it for the money, not looking at it to see, oh, how many people are looking at me, but how many people can I make sure that this program affects? How many people can come here, learn something? And we led a session yesterday. My biggest thing in the end is share this with 2 to 3 people because that's how we create generational wealth. It doesn't start by us having the information and holding it on to ourselves, but making sure that we're sharing it with others. So that's what my prosperity looks like, the passion behind it, and then the purpose.
Yeah, and I love that. Now, when we talk about your company, Wall Street Juniors, tell them a little bit about what started it, and then what are some of the goals that you have with Wall Street Juniors?
Yes, Wall Street Juniors started in 2018. I had actually attended a stock option and bonds conference, and I was up one day. I was still an undergrad, and I was a broke college student looking like, all right, what can I do? What else is out there? Help me, Jesus. So I actually came across something that said I could go to this free clinic, a free conference with a scholarship. So I thought it was just an ad, but when I actually applied for it, they told me the next morning that I got it. I got there, I met people from South Africa, Canada, Australia, people who I still have contact with today. And at the time, I was only 19. So sitting there learning this information, being a minority, being probably the youngest person in the building, I'm like, okay, people back home need to know about this. My friends who I grew up with in the streets, I'm sure that they could learn this information because we have the mentality, right? So that's when I started understanding that wealth started in the mind, right? From there, I started studying applied behavior analysis, which is where I got my master's in. And I said, okay, I don't want to study it from an autism perspective, but from a mentalistic perspective of wealth being a behavior, right? So that's when we looked at the welfare to wealth mentality. And that's what my graduate research research was on. And from there, we kept rolling and rocking. And it's like, okay, we need to learn this knowledge, reteach it to the community, but not just teach it, but search for the effectiveness in the program through the evaluation phase. So saying, okay, let's check in with them. Let's be accountability partners. Let's really show people what it looks like to be community. So using that as a model, providing the feedback, and then providing that evaluation is what we're looking to do. So making sure that we're not just teaching financial literacy, because I think that word kind of gets thrown around a lot now, but making sure that we're going towards financial capability for our families, for our communities, and for our culture so that we can create that generational wealth.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. And so I just want to ask you, a couple questions came to mind while you were talking. And so one thing that I would say is, and so I definitely don't want you to take offense to this because this happens to me, but do you find that your age / energy, right, is something that maybe people are like, oh, well, you might not know as much as you think you know, right? And sometimes it happens because you're a woman. Sometimes it happens because you're Black. But a lot of times I would say people like us that have that energy that we bring to things, people feel like, okay, they're already getting ready to be a little bit too much work, or, and it's the enthusiasm that I think that we share for whatever it is that we are passionate about, that it just bubbles over and it just comes out, as just all of the, kind of a hype, but it's like a good hype because we know that we are capable of doing those things. But do you find that sometimes either age or energy or being a woman or being Black might be one of those things where people are like not necessarily maybe taking you serious, or maybe they don't feel like the capability is there, even though you have the qualifications? So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there because I think that happens to a lot of people.
Oh yeah, it's a blessing and a curse, but I think it's also a blessing in disguise because it builds that resiliency in you. You know what I mean? So it shows you how you can go into many places and still be a vessel. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, I tell people all the time, I'm a chameleon. So like my mom used to say when I was growing up, I can go from the liquor house to the White House in 0.5 seconds. Okay, so I can go and be with my people on Liberty Street in Durham, but I can also go and sit with Congress, or I can go and sit in the mayor's office and still have that conversation and be an advocate on that behalf. But I'm bringing my passion and my purpose with me every single time, and that's the S that I wear on my chest. You know what I mean? So showing up unapologetically as me every time is what they remember first.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, I just know, like, I've been in situations and people are like, oh my God, she just has so much energy. And I'm like, but you know what? That's not a negative thing. A lot of times we walk into rooms and as women, as Black women, as, young, whatever, people tend to get intimidated by the fact that you have energy and charisma. And I'm just like, I never really understood why that was, but I think sometimes people just don't know how to show up, authentically as themselves. And they feel like if they do show too much, then, there may be some type of issue. But I think that definitely works, especially when you're talking about a younger population too, because you have to grab their attention. You can't just go into the room with the youth and be a, dry eyes, right? Like you have to give them the energy that they're used to having. Now, one thing that you do is you are back and forth between Atlanta and North Carolina all the time. All right. And so can you give them a little bit of like background about, what you do with the program and how that works for you?
Yes, so we do operate two chapters, one in Durham, North Carolina, which is our founding chapter, and then another in Atlanta, Georgia. What we do with that is build the community sustainability first. So making sure that we have operations where it can be community led. So building that relationship, building our partnerships, making sure that we have opportunities where people can volunteer, get to know us, get to see what our business model looks like or our organization is. And then we go in and actually start the teaching process. So for instance, when we first started in North Carolina, we actually went to a lot of families and schools and different institutions that we were already familiar with and had relationships with, and then we built from there. Same thing with Atlanta. Now that Durham is in a way where it can coast and it's doing well, we have people in places, we have program facilitators. Now we're in the process of also building the Atlanta chapter up also. So that looks like our financial literacy labs on on a monthly basis. We actually had one hybrid yesterday, so it was in Decatur, Georgia, but we also streamed it online for our North Carolina peeps, right? So we do that back and forth so that we can also accommodate everyone, but also make it equitable, right? So it's not like, oh, you have to come. You can also join us from where you are. I had one mother who was online because she was cooking dinner, but her two kids were there with us in Decatur. You know what I mean? So making sure that it is a family initiative, but also showing them that we can do community together, and community is an action, right? So making opportunities where people can see themselves in us. So we started by adopting 5 streets in Durham. And what we did, I shared with you, I started losing friends at the age of 13. My very first friend, she was shot in a drive-by when I was in the 7th grade. And after that, it was almost like I lost 2 to 3 friends every single year. And after seeing how that affected myself and then my community, I'm like, we need something that's going to uplift us, something where people can model the behaviors that we want to see in our community. So I adopted those streets and named them after those individuals. But it's called Legacy Lane because we want to bring that legacy back into our community where we can say, no more just putting you on a t-shirt, but let's say we're going out into the community to make it better in honor of you, right? To keep this legacy going, to show the community, hey, I knew that person. Let me go out there and clean that street that they're named after. Hey, I'm part of their family. Let me come out, to the point we've had over 50 people in Durham at one time cleaning the streets, right? So that's collective power to me. That's what it looks like to really say, okay, we're doing community-led capacity building, not just community capacity building, right? Because now they can see themselves not only in us, but in the future of what community looks like. The one thing I like to say, let's make Durham great again. Let's make Atlanta great again, right? And the original part of it was, yeah, Black Wall Street. Yeah, we want to teach the financial literacy portion of it, but I also want you to understand that you can invest into your community through acts of love and service first, and then we can work on everything else. Because one thing that we lack in our BIPOC communities is togetherness, right? So if I could go and knock on Miss Mary's door to avoid going to pay for some $7 eggs at the store and just say, hey, Miss Mary, can I borrow some eggs for my dinner tonight? I just saved $7. You see what I'm saying? So now that's operating not just as like it takes a village to raise a child, but it takes a village to raise a village, right? And that's where our wealth lies. So if we can kind of drop these nuggets in as many places as possible, that's what it looks like to be effective for Wall Street Juniors.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that I would say, like just listening to you is, to me, you're talking about the way things used to be, right? Like if you grew up, 70s, 80s, 60s, stuff is just not like that now. You know what I mean? And so one of the things that I could say specifically in the Durham community is gentrification has definitely happened. And that does affect who your neighbor is and their willingness to be a part of the community, because now the community itself does not look like it used to look, right? So with what you're doing with the financial literacy and the population that you're trying to specifically help, I love the idea, because what we do over here is call it mental wealth, of getting your mind right and your money right, of focusing and really starting when it comes to the money and you understanding how to do that. So when you're working with your financial literacy program, what are some of the things that you teach your students?
So we actually follow the 5 components of the behavior of managing money, creating a stable operation within your household, and that's earning, spending, saving, investing, and managing your money. So we're looking at it from a behavioral standpoint. How you earn, what's your earning potential? How are you spending? Are you budgeting? Do you know how much you're spending on an everyday basis? Now we have people who are actually actively understanding the difference between their expenses and their revenue, what they're actually spending on. A lot of people say, oh, I need this, I need that, I need a raise, but they still have the same spending behaviors with more money, right? So they're not saving anything, huh? So like last night, we had a session on emergency savings plans, and I asked for some feedback from some of our attendees. I'm like, how did you like it? She said, wow, now I know I need more than one savings. People just think they need one savings, right? So it's dropping the knowledge, but also making sure that they're applying that behavior as well. Because like I mentioned, it's from a behavioral standpoint with this. We want to make sure that you're applying the knowledge. It's not enough just to teach it anymore. It's not enough to just say, I'm going to put this information in front of you. We have to make sure that people are actually utilizing the knowledge that we're giving them, right? So that's one thing that we're in the process of doing. Our program, the Community Wealth Building Initiative, actually starts tomorrow in East Durham. Yes, awesome. So that, like I mentioned, stemmed from the welfare to wealth research, and we were doing research in McDougal Terrence when we had our after-school program there, and really seeing what the community needed. And I'm like, it's not just financial literacy, y'all. It's more than that. People need to understand the togetherness in it, and then we also can grow together. You know what I mean? Because now I can pass this knowledge on. Now I can have these conversations around table with my children. Now I can introduce as early as pre-K, because that's where our curriculum starts. It starts at pre-K, because now I can teach a child token economy. Now they understand how money is earned and how money is spent, right? Now you can start taking them to the store and they know you're using a card. I've heard so many kids say, oh, my mommy uses that plastic. My mommy used that card. Oh, what's that card? That card has money, right? Start these conversations. So now we're not setting up our future generations for failure, but making sure that they have that strategic planning, which is also a behavior, right? So making sure that we're introducing those concepts, but also giving them the opportunity to rehearse this, and then also giving them that feedback. So we have financial behavioralists that are working with our communities now, and also community strategists in these areas where now we're building the community. So right now we're saying East Durham is under construction. We're rebuilding. We are rebuilding, and it starts tomorrow. So like I mentioned, we're going into every neighborhood or district in Durham. We're starting in East Durham. We're going to West End in February. In March, we'll be in the South Side. And then in April, we'll be in North Durham. And the goal is to come into these spaces where people can come and be a part of these conversations and say, hey, yeah, I usually say I'm broke, but I really mean that I'm on a budget. So now we're changing our verbiage, right? Which also helps us change our actions. Because if you know you're on a budget, then you're going to actually stick to it, right? You're going to actually you're going to sit down and say, okay, what are my expenses? We have an opportunity where one of our games where we have two cards, right? And one card is a man who is in front of a tractor on his farm. And then another card is a guy who's sitting in front of a Maserati. Which one is wealth?
Well, I mean, I think it depends on which way you look at it. Because if he owns the farm, then he's got the money.
On the back of the card is a personal financial statement. And on that personal financial statement, you can see their assets and you can see their liability. And now you can see their net worth. So we're talking about people net worths, right? Because we're talking about celebrities, but no one even actually really knows the calculation for that. So now we're debunking these myths of what wealth really looks like. And this is an everyday experience, because sometimes the first person, the average person will pick the guy with the Maserati and the suit on because he looks wealthy. But here we have a guy who's paid off his farm. He's doing what he needs to do. The money is flowing in. He has life insurance policies. He has some stocks, options, and bonds built up. And now he has more assets than his liability. So his net worth is way more than my guy who has this car payment or who's still renting, right? Or who doesn't have a life insurance policy that he can borrow from. And these are things that our communities just don't know about. So our goal is to make it culturally competent, but also sprinkle in the knowledge and allow them to actually look at the information. And like I said, this is a game, right? So now I'm playing a game, but it's subliminal because now I'm actually learning too. And our sessions are for 13 and up because we want your family to do it together. We want it to be a way where now a child can look at a personal financial statement and actually identify, okay, well, maybe I need a plan for retirement. Maybe I need to understand what it looks like to have some liquidations coming in. Maybe I need to know what I actually have as expenses or what is a liability for me, or keep my student loan debt down so that I can actually have.
Or don't get student loans in the first place. Like that's really the thing that you really need to focus on. So, I mean, and it makes sense. About there's a term that is being financially illiterate is a disability. So can you explain to people what that means? Being financially illiterate is a disability.
Yes. So that also came from the research that I did during grad school. Just looking at it from that behavioral analytic point where I said, we can't create or we can't do the things that we need to do if we don't have the mentality or the behaviors to lead us into the direction that we want to be in, right? So saying I can't stay home with my kid when they're sick because I have to go to work. That's a disability for me. Now I have role conflict. I got to pick to be a mom or to be a worker
Mm-hmm.
or employee, excuse me. And that is a disability for me because now I'm disabled as a mother.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have kids yet, but I don't want to ever face that. I don't want that disability. You know what I mean? Or I have a family member who I can't take care of. I have to send it to a home. Right now, that's a disability for my family. So it's like, how can we set up things where now we're financially literate to the point where now these things can actually be an asset for us and work for us in the long run? And like I mentioned, that strategic planning, making sure that we have the things we need, but it starts with the knowledge, right? It's the knowledge, then it's applying it as a behavior. And because we don't have the knowledge, we can't apply the behavior.
Well, I like that because I think that, when you look at the concept and you take into consideration what people would normally look at as a disability might be something more physical, something that, that's actually that you can kind of, well, not necessarily can't control. But when you look at the way that you're talking about this term, it is basically saying I need to have the means to be able to take care of myself and my family. And so even if you had to put that person in the home, do you have the money for that person to go into a home? And when you look at this and you talk about generationally, did the person have insurance? Did they have Medicaid, Medicare, any of those things? And are they on the right policy? Is there something that, you're being able to teach the person, because they might be 60, 70, 80 years old and maybe nobody taught them this. They just been living their life. And so one thing that I could say over the years is I always have to take into consideration that everybody didn't grow up like me. Everybody didn't have the same education or the same opportunities. And what I've learned is sometimes people just don't know. So you can't expect that they would do things in a certain way if they just don't know. Now, I am a big believer that you can Google almost anything nowadays. Okay. So nowadays, I don't think there's necessarily as much of an excuse to not know stuff. But what I've also paid attention to is sometimes people don't know the question to ask to even get the answer. So if you didn't know all of that, then it puts you at a disadvantage, and it definitely makes you disabled in a way where you can't do certain things, And so there are things that I've just learned from going to classes and courses, and just kind of circling back to what you said earlier. You went to a conference, you saw an opportunity, you applied for it, and then you got on to the next thing, which led you to be successful in this business. And the thing that I always think about is, one of my things has always been, before it was popular, I tell people show up and show out. Sometimes you just have to show up to the things, and then you'd be amazed at the people that you meet. And you've also kind of talked about like building relationships in this. So, I want to touch on just real quick, because we have about a little bit over 5 minutes left, but what was the inspiration for you being a part of the Black Wall Street? Did you feel like you would build more relationships in that, or that there was just something that you felt like you could give to this particular initiative?
I was honored to even be asked to be a part of it because I'm like, what? Reimagining the Black Wall Street? That is Wall Street Juniors, right? So for me, now that I've learned of what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we're doing it, because I'm like yourself, did you know what you were getting into when you first started with the program? Because
Oh,
I
I
did.
did. I
Okay.
did, because I asked a million questions, and part of that is me. I'm not about to jump into anything and just, because my biggest thing is time, right? So I need to know what's the time investment and what are the objectives that we're supposed to have at the end. And once I found that out, I mean, first of all, the idea sounded great, right? But what are we doing? And so I personally have enjoyed the program thus far. And I'm just, interested in seeing, what comes out of it. But yeah, go ahead with yours.
Yeah, I think for me, I was so up in the air. I'm like, wow, this is great. This is what we need. I'm like, okay, cool. And then when we got into it and we really started actually brainstorming and reimagining and taking the steps to strategically do what we're saying we're going to do, I was like, oh, I'm in the perfect place. This is literally, when I left the first time we met in person, I booed. I'm not gonna lie to you. I
Okay.
cried because one, I was in the North Carolina Mutual Life building, Being in Durham, I've never stepped foot in that building. And I really felt like, wow, I'm where we need to be to restart this journey. This is what it looks like. After hearing about the opportunities, seeing people really get together and actually do the work that they did years ago, it was like, wow, we actually can be this, right? And it's almost like your manifestations and your visions that you've had about what you want the world to look like, right? And I tell people all the time, if you want to make the world a better place, you got to start with yourself, right? So it was like, wow, I'm doing it now. And now I can show other people how we can take this lesson. I believe all the time the best leaders are followers, right? So me, I was following the lead there, and I'm like, wow, now I can see myself doing this for the next generations as well, to show them like, hey guys, we can bring this back, because we needed that, right? So many people in the community don't see where the Black Wall Street is, or so many communities it don't even know existed in Durham, right? So now for me, I think what it has been a dream come true, honestly, to just know that it exists, but also knowing that they're doing it from a research background, they're doing it with data to prove it, and then we're also doing it together is the biggest thing for me. But the networks that I've learned from you, from Latoya, from Jaleisha. She's even came to one of my sessions for business funding and talked about things that she has access to funders, and she looks like us. She sounds like us, right? And I think that that's the biggest thing, because that's what really gives people hope. That's what shows them that we can, right? So I think for myself, the network alone is beautiful, but just knowing that it exists is even more beautiful, and like I said, I did cry, because it was like, wow, it's coming. And it felt real, for so long. I've been doing research on the Black Wall Street since I was probably 8 years old. My grandma used to be like, stop bringing nonfiction books home. Go get a fiction book. I want to see you read something about some fairies, right?
Grandma. But see, you know what? That just shows like it was already in you, you know what I mean? And I love the history aspect of it too. Like, I think to me, that's the most important part. But one thing that I can say with this is I always feel like, the history, or if you do know, now what are you going to do next? And I think it gives us the opportunity to be the next level of influencers in this. And to be honest with you, it's way easier now than it was back in the 20s when they were starting, right? And, we know racism still exists. We know that there are still barriers and all the rest of that. And I always get frustrated when people want to talk about all of the negatives, because that drives me completely crazy. What can we do now to positively impact where we're going? You know what I mean? And I think that this is one of those efforts. So your business, Wall Street Juniors, is definitely one of those things that was already impacting it, and now will continue to be able to do so. So tell people where they can find you online.
Yes, you can go to www.wallstreetjr.org. And then you can also find me on Wall Street Juniors on Instagram, or KL Booker on IG as well.
Yes. Okay. So if you could leave people with one last thing, like if they said, look, I'm interested in being a part of your program, or I would like to donate, can they donate on the website as well? Can they donate time? If they have a specific skill set, like what are you looking for so people can continue to help you grow?
Yes, we are always looking for supporters, and our supporters, we call them community partners. So whether you come out and help us in the community by cleaning the streets with us, whether you come out and teach a class, we have sessions every month, or whether you would like to support us with some monetary donations, we are welcomed of all open arms here. But one of the biggest things that we can do together is to actually take the initiative to start.
I like that. All right. Well, see, you ended it on a perfect note. So I want to thank you so much, MaKayla, for being on today. And everybody, if you're watching this on the replay, please know that you can still share. You can still comment afterwards. We love that, to be able to share like what you got out of this, and then go to her website and visit and just do all of the things. If you feel like you can give something on a virtual basis, on an in-person basis, if you have dollars to give, then definitely do that, because she is doing the work. And I think that makes a whole lot more difference than people to just say it, when you have somebody that's really in the community and she's in two different ones, helping our people to be able to be successful. So MaKayla, thank you again so much. And everybody else, make sure that you check our website for future episodes that are coming up. And you can also go back and you can watch any of the old episodes. We have them on giveittothepeople.com, and we're updating the site on a regular basis. And you can also go to chisatv.com, and that's where you'll find like plenty of other episodes. And we have a person that's live, Esteban, saying awesome. So Esteban, thank you so much for being on live with us today. Everybody else, make sure you continue to show up and show out and give it to the people.
Give it to the people.
Bye, guys. Thank you.